problem with competition is that it doesn't build self-confidence. Trying to get past the competitive model is a useful thing for developing children's own inner strength.
You cannot have outstanding education and outstanding profits. The two just don't marry.
Have more failures.
As long as you learn from each one. Suddenly you're giving grades and scores for using feedback that you got from teachers.
Let's talk about family culture and traditions in education.
There are three factors: respect the local culture, respect the local culture, and respect the local culture. That's the formula. This is your last chance. 2 seconds later, right, I'm going to give you one more chance. I see it too often, and we've really got to raise the standards and raise the stakes on how to improve negative behaviour. It's called tough love. Fairly simple. Quality education will bring about good profits.
They're all the same. They all have exactly the same challenges. I think AI is going to take over subject teaching.
IB program is known for developing critical thinkers.
A lot of principals, a lot of owners ask the question, why is it 22,000?
Kia ora everyone! Welcome to today's episode where we bring a conversation as powerful as an All Blacks haka, full of energy, strategy, and passion for the future of education. Our guests today are two esteemed educators from Aotearoa, New Zealand, who are shaping learning experience around the world. Lance is an IB expert with a deep understanding of international education. And Mike is a visionary who has opened schools across the globe. Welcome to Kazakhstan.
Thank you very much.
Nice to be here.
Together we will dive into the future of learning, the importance of family traditions, and how education can be as strong and enduring as a kiwi silver fern. So grab a cuppa and let's get started. Lance, let's start with you. Can you share a bit about your background and what inspired you to work in education?
Well, it's, I guess I kind of fell into it because my first degree was in food technology. And so I was working in the food industry. But because of the birth of my first son, I was out of work for a time. And I took the first job that came up, which was teaching, and suddenly discovered that I loved teaching. And so I went on with that and set up my own business and have been working in education, teaching children and teaching teachers and teaching parents since 1995. So it was an accident which turned into a lifelong career, which I've loved.
Interesting. Thank you. What about you, Mike? What led you to your work in opening schools around the world?
Sure. From the beginning, my father wanted me to be a businessman because he's a businessman. So he said, Mike, why do you want to go into teaching? And I believed that I had a passion for teaching. That's what I really wanted to do. And I'm not going to say a passion that I wanted to change the world or anything like that. I just loved the thought of teaching. So I went into teaching, and then probably after a couple of years, I thought to myself, okay, then I need to travel overseas and see a little bit more of the world, which I did. And I accidentally fell into leadership. A school that I was at wasn't going particularly well. The school board at the time said, listen, you're not making a difference to the school, be head of the school. And it just really progressed from that point. And then I took my skills to for-profit schools in the international scenario. And that changed my way of doing things, my thought processes, and opening schools or developing schools that weren't going well. So that's where I'm at the moment. Every single international school has its own challenges.
Yes, so interesting. You've both worked in different countries. What unique perspectives has this given you in education?
Well, for me, the one thing I discovered, like I've worked in 39 countries and worked
39.
I started off mostly working just with kids, teaching children how to learn more effectively and more efficiently. in all those countries. And one thing I discovered was that kids are all the same.
Wow.
They're all the same. They all have exactly the same challenges. The challenges of getting themselves to do work that they find meaningless and without purpose in order to pass exams that they don't see any reason for in order for some future gain. How do they motivate themselves? How do they persist and persevere? How do they get the work done? And how do they manage the incredible quantity of information that children are enveloped with these days? The challenges are all the same. So my international perspective was that there really isn't any difference. It's just that within the school culture, there are specific challenges for each school. But generally, children are the same. And parents are pretty much the same wherever you go. And teachers are trying to do that intermediate job of getting the children prepared whilst meeting the demands of parents. And so their challenges are pretty similar wherever they are to me. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Mike, what's your take on this?
Sure, the international perspective has changed my thinking significantly, in as much as that a number of international schools that I've led or I have developed have had up to 80 different nationalities.
Wow.
And when you put 80 different nationalities in the mix, it changes the whole culture of the school. Bearing in mind, add to the complex situation is this factor, that you're in a different country with a different culture, and you've got up to 80 different nationalities within the local culture. The extraordinary demands that has is quite phenomenal. So you've got one culture that you're in, maybe say an Arabic culture, maybe in the Gulf, and you've got 80 different nationalities within that culture. And one of the main factors is, there are three factors: respect the local culture, and respect the local culture. That's the formula. And of course, doesn't matter which country you go to, you find that you can easily do that. You can easily respect the local culture, and you can learn so much from it.
We're looking that education is evolving so rapidly. Lance, what do you think schools will look like in 20 years?
Wow, 20 years, that's a long way out. I mean, right now, Mustafa Suleyman, who's the CEO of Microsoft AI, and he's been involved in AI forever, he made a statement just last year that he said that within 2 years, every person will have the best tutor in the world in their pocket for free. And that's AI. I think AI is going to take over subject teaching very, very soon. It's not way in the future, it's very soon. Because an AI can teach a child a subject to specifically meet that child's best ability to learn, to reinforce the things that child does well, and teach the child how to do other things better in order to learn that subject well. So if you imagine that every child is being taught subjects through a tablet in the best possible way for that child to learn, then that to me is going to be a profound change, because most teachers, their whole well-being, their whole life is based around being a subject teacher, a biology teacher or an English teacher. And they're going to have to make a shift. They're going to have to make a shift to teaching process, to teaching thinking, to teaching emotional well-being, to teaching all the things that actually make up that child's character and that child's ability to process information rapidly. And so I think I can't even imagine what education will be like in 20 years' time, but I imagine there will be no longer that one teacher standing in front of 30 children telling them what he or she knows. That will be gone. So that teacher will have much more of a pastoral role in looking after the children and making sure the children are well supported, and that all their emotional development and physical development is well catered for. So that's what I can see coming. And so classes will disappear, individual tuition will keep on growing. And so the most important thing for children is those skills of being a self-managed, autonomous learner. And so that to me will be the focus. But 20 years is a long way out. So that's probably about my vision. That would be a vision for the next 10 years.
Yes. It's interesting that we live in a very interesting time because it's in social media. We have a lot of fun pictures that in 50 years we have space discovery, internet, a lot of evolutionary things, but schools not change. And now we are standing in very interesting break-even point of evolution of our education. Mike, what's about you?
Look, we've been talking about the replacement of teachers. You know, that the old argument, and 20 years ago, we said 20 years, in 20 years' time, teachers would be replaced by robots, et cetera, et cetera. All sorts of different arguments were going on, and teachers were saying, should we be worried about this? And my standard answer is no. And I agree with Lance. Our job will change. We won't have fewer teachers, but the nature of the job will change, and it'll change quite dramatically. We've always talked about teachers being facilitators of learning. This will be more so when AI has a more significant impact on the learning process. So teachers will be in the background, but they will be in the forefront also. It may sound contradictory, but they'll be in the forefront of, as Lance was saying, emotional intelligence and how kids are organising themselves, etc., and picking up the bits and pieces of both emotional and academic that go along with artificial intelligence. Because artificial intelligence learning isn't 100%. It will get better and better and better, but you'll always have the human impact. That teacher in another context standing around saying, okay, where can we go from here? And that conversation must take place, because no good the conversation just happening with AI and the student saying, the AI person says, where can we go from here? And the child says, oh, I think this, and the AI says, I think this. The real development will take place behind the scenes with that great interaction, that great relationship, the human relationship with the teacher. And that's how children will advance. So there'll be an emphasis and a role with AI, no doubt about that, but it will never, ever replace the teacher's role.
Yeah.
However, the teacher's role will change.
Yes.
No doubt about that.
I agree with you both, but I think if we go a little bit detailed and look at primary schools, I think, in my opinion, that in primary school, any technology, any artificial intelligence could not replace teacher because of age and these psychological factors. Kids need this. Kids need to feel human.
Yes.
Teacher, hear her or his voice, but maybe AI help to increase the quality in some rural places where we have deficit of teachers in this.
Sure, yeah, great.
Yeah. For example, in Kazakhstan, we have this new strategy. Our government, they install Starlink.
Starlink, that's
right. Elon Musk.
Yeah, and then they want to develop digital education in higher schools in rural places. Because we have problem of quantity of high level teachers in Kazakhstan.
And also the scarcity of fiber and Wi-Fi links. So you use Starlink, which makes sense. Yes.
Lance, the IB program is known for developing critical thinkers. How do you see its role in shaping future global citizens?
Yeah, I don't think IB is alone in developing critical thinkers, but the IB, one unique facet of the IB is the ATL program, the Approaches to Learning program, which is unique, and I was a big part of designing that. And so it gets more emphasis, the development of critical and creative thinkers and good problem solvers and good communicators and collaborators. It gets more emphasis in parts of the IB, in the junior program, the PYP, and the middle years program, the MYP. Gets less emphasis in the DP, but hopefully children have taken on board all the skills they need by the time they get to the DP. But I think all education systems can develop critical and creative thinking by putting some emphasis on it. You can't develop those things just by saying, well, we'll just teach in a more interactive way. It's not going to produce those particular skills. I think all those skills need specific teaching. And with a specific learning and thinking skills program, any school can develop critical and creative thinkers and good problem solvers for the future. But I think it takes emphasis and takes specific, explicit teaching. You can't just rely on general teaching to develop those skills. I think they need to be taught specifically.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Lance. Mike, from your experience in opening new schools, do you see IB as the future model, or do you think other approaches work just as well?
It certainly is a very good model of education. There's no doubt about that. I've had a number of IB schools and very successful. There are a couple of issues that IB would probably need to look at, and that's the overload of work and tension that's put on the IB diploma students. It's, to use the vernacular, it's over the top. Secondly, the ATL type skills teaching disappears significantly in the diploma program. So I would encourage teachers, and I'm entirely on Lance's side here, the more ATL skills teaching and learning we do pre-IB diploma, the better the students, the more students will be able to succeed in the IB diploma in years 12 and 13. I also take a step back. It's funny, isn't it? Again, I entirely agree with Lance. We must have separate, explicit ATL classes or critical thinking classes. And it amuses me. I don't think you'll find a mission statement without the term critical thinking skills. And quite honestly, it makes me almost shudder and holistic learning. Okay, throw those two things in and you're right with your mission statement. But when you look at what's actually happening in real life, in the actual classroom, often it doesn't match the mission statement. So we've got critical thinking skills, which has almost become a throwaway line, and holistic education. So unless we have explicit ATL classes, critical thinking classes, taught by, I say experts, and I really do mean that, I think we're failing our students because we're just simply putting the line out there in the mission statement, satisfying the parents or our community, our stakeholders, so to speak, and we just get on with our lives. So we need explicit intervention, and we've got to name the program, name it, allow for time in the curriculum, allow for teaching time, and teach it. And also teach the parents what we're teaching. And also make sure that the teachers are trained to put the thinking skills into action into their lessons. It needs to permeate through the whole. Now, saying that, that's easy to say.
Yes.
There's the challenge about putting it, and that's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time and expertise.
Yeah, if we continue talking about the money, is it true that to invent IB program is much more higher in price in investments than any other international curriculum?
It's what frightens a lot of schools and a lot of school owners. Let me think, about 22,000 euros per year, not in the inspection year, not in the accreditation year, it's even more then.
How much?
22,000 euros per annum.
Whoa.
If you've got a full through IB program, in other words, PYP, MYP and the IB diploma, it's about 22,000. And There are some questions about that, which I won't go into now. I'll be a bit diplomatic, but a lot of principals, a lot of owners ask the question, why is it 22,000? I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. What skills do students today need the most to succeed in an unpredictable future, Lance?
Well, I mean, the work that I've done, I turn all the 21st century skills into 14 different categories, and I think children need all 14 categories. Mm-hmm. So there's communication skills and collaboration skills and research skills and media skills and character skills, and there are 14 different areas, and children need all of them. And so all of the work, I've written a few books, and I've now had some of my books translated into Kazakh and into Russian.
Oh, really?
Yes, I'm doing a book launch in Astana next week, and I have 3 books, one for the middle years and junior, one for the senior years, and a teacher's book, all on 21st century skills, which are now translated into both Kazakh and Russian.
Great
and we're
news.
Launching those
Congratulations.
next. And that's the curriculum. That's my curriculum. So it's big, and it really is almost, the aim of the exercise is to make it into a subject of itself, like we were just talking about. If our 21st century skills could be in place, in class, in schools for 1 hour per week per child, using those books, then I think that we would achieve the results that we're after in terms of giving children the necessary skills.
Yeah. What about you, Mike?
Two points here. We must teach those explicitly, those 21st century skills. Therefore, something's got to be removed from the curriculum for that to happen. Now, you have a look over the years. We've added stuff to the curriculum. Every time society has a crisis, schools have got to lift their game. And I remember when HIV became prominent, we had to have HIV classes. I remember very recently...
What year?
Sorry?
In what year? In what period you have?
Ooh, that would have been back in...
The 80s?
The
maybe?
80s.
Oh.
Yeah.
We had to have HIV programs running. Just very recently, transgender stuff, identity crisis stuff, add that to the curriculum, for goodness sake. And we've been, the sex education program, going back decades now, add that to the program. Mm-hmm. We have added so much to the curriculum that we are bursting. And every now and again, education departments or governments or educators say, enough's enough, we've got to tone it down, we've got to reduce the size of the curriculum. It's become too packed.
Yes.
It's overcrowded. That's the term that they use. But we don't do anything about it. So therefore, the good stuff, such as ATL and thinking skills and critical thinking, in many scenarios, that particular curriculum doesn't get a Guernsey. The reason is it's already overpacked. And the school said, how can we fit this in? Well, we've got to make some big decisions here. The thinking skills curriculum, the ATL program, that has to be in, and yet why isn't it in most schools, for goodness sake? That has to be in, and we have to get rid of components of the curriculum or indeed whole subjects. And I'm not, some of the stuff that's been introduced in schools is, well, it's debatable, the merit of them. So perhaps we chip away and getting rid of a little bit in each subject to make room for a genuine ATL subject that has the same standing as mathematics in numbers. So you might like to think, say we teach 5 hours of maths a week. We'll have 5 hours of ATL. That's because that's what makes the difference. My second point is I've asked many employers, being my main interest is in the top end of the school, so we're looking at, relationships with industry, relationships with the university. What is the key? One, just think, don't give me 14 things, because 14 things and 14 things are right, that Lance was referring to. Just give me one thing. And the majority say, give me back one thing. collaboration. If you teach students how to listen and how to work together and come up with solutions that people can agree with, people can identify with, that's the sort of person we want. We want a team player with collaborative skills. We want a team player with collaborative skills. And most employers that I talk to, they come out with that. Some others want technical skills, all of that is their number one. Sure, technical skills must be there, but they want people to collaborate.
It's interesting because I have read some research on the influence of high academic level of students and collaboration level. So maybe it's just statistical data, but its summary is that the more academic efficiency the student receive, less collaboration, because more academic efficiency mean more work without team, just read a lot of stuff, examination, tests. So what do you think about it?
It's to do with competition, isn't it? So an individual will compete with another individual to push themselves higher. Now that's okay, it's a useful use of competition, but the problem with competition is that it doesn't build self-confidence.
Oh.
You only build self-confidence by noticing that you have improved compared with yourself. I'll give you an example. What do you think is the single common ambition that all Olympic athletes have?
Yes.
And when I ask people this question, they usually say, well, it's gold medal. They all want a gold medal. And no, that's not the single ambition that all Olympic athletes have. Their single ambition is to do a PB, which stands for personal best, to push themselves by using high-class competition to push themselves up higher. But they're comparing themselves with themselves and pushing themselves to a higher level. Yeah. Now, if instead of having competition as being the primary driver of academic excellence, we focused on everyone achieving a PB, continuously pushing themselves up to a higher level and utilizing competition to help with that, but focusing on their own improvement. If academic assessment was based on the change that a child has managed to produce in their maths or in their English language or whatever, where I was 6 months ago and where I am now, that's the thing that gets graded. The actual change and development of a child compared with themselves, not with anyone else, then that would increase self-confidence. And self-confidence is behind all, top progress. And so I think that trying to get past the competitive model is a useful thing for developing children's own inner strength and inner abilities.
Yeah, it's a great insight, because I see how many teachers nowadays not following this rule. I mean, they, as a teacher, as an influence person in the classroom, they like when students compete with each other.
Which means you've always got a winner and a loser, and the loser self-esteem goes down and doesn't perform so well next time, maybe. So, I think a blended model works best.
You took my point just then.
Oh, sorry.
So I did some work looking at a particular school in Sydney, or a particular group of schools in Sydney. Say there are about 200 matriculation students in each of the schools. And these schools are based entirely on academics and entirely on competition. And what we saw was almost a dog-eat-dog scenario, where there was one winner and 199 losers, because the one winner scored whatever percentage and the other 199 scored fewer points. And the collaboration in these schools was zero, because every student wanted to be that one winner.
Yeah.
And honestly, the emotions, the collaborative nature of this, the emotional status was detrimental. The collaboration between students was zero, and it became this dog-eat-dog syndrome. And quite honestly, it does affect the whole culture of the school. Yes, are the students achieving? Yes, but there's only one real achiever, and that's the person who comes first. So go back to Lance's point. I always make people ask me what schools are about. I said, if we can get happy students, that's the first thing. Happy and fulfilled students, that's the first criterion. And secondly, measure their progress. So it's about student progress, not about coming first. They may come first, about students' progress and that gap. So only two things. That's all we're interested. Happy students. They come to school skipping and laughing and saying, I feel welcomed here. I feel valued here. I'm happy in myself and I've got friends and I collaborate. And I'm making progress. And the progress that I'm making, I can actually identify it. And sometimes the teacher helps me identify that and helps me set new goals, constructivist approach, to make more progress. So schools aren't really that complicated. They're not really complicated if you take those two things. It is getting those two things achieved is rather complicated though.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Mike, I know that you visited around 70 countries. So some countries you visit as a tourist, in some countries you work and open new schools. So could you please say what are the key differences in opening these new schools in different parts of the world?
Sure. One of the key difference, if you look at the stability of different countries, we were in Libya and, we were designing schools and laying down the foundations for new schools. And of course, the revolution occurred.
Yeah.
Nobody saw that coming.
Unfortunately.
Therefore, we lost direction, we lost the project. So the stability of a certain country that's my number one. It's my number one. And we've won projects and we've lost projects because of that instability, the global effect that has on different countries. We have lost other projects like that because of the instability, not necessarily caused by the country itself, but sometimes global movements. The second thing in starting a school is when you speak to the owners of the school, they want you to either establish a school or develop their school that's not going too well. We've done a few of those. And I always say to the owner, he says, obviously he wants to make money of it, and that's fine. Making money out of education is fine. I give them one line. You cannot have outstanding education and outstanding profits. The two just don't marry. You've got to invest a lot of your profits into increasing the outstanding nature of your school. You can have outstanding education and very good profits, and therein lies the big challenge for owners.
Yes.
Because let's face it, a lot of them are businessmen. They want to make as much profit as possible. But there's the great challenge for educators, to convince the owner that very good profits come out of outstanding education. Outstanding education will not come out of outstanding profits. The two just don't marry. Yeah. And that's a challenge, by the way.
100% agree. It's true. Lance, what about you? I know that you written the book, which is implemented in all around the globe in IB schools, and it's around 400,000 students read and not read. They follow this program. Could you say something about these differences and about your implementation to the education?
I guess because I work directly with students, I find that the same skills are needed everywhere in the world, and students are, as I said before, more or less the same, have the same challenges. So I don't see much difference between cultures in terms of the implementation of a 21st century skills program or an ATL skills program. I see differences in parents. I mean, one of my big things that I'm always talking about is what I call failing well. So being able to learn well from failure. There's a model that I have called failing well. And I go to some countries and I start talking to parents and I'm talking about dealing with failure and they have a big reaction, like, we don't want to talk about failure, failure is to be avoided. And I say, no, failure is to be embraced because failure is how we learn as long as we've got a model of failing well. But I go to other countries. I remember going to Denmark and I had this group of parents and I was doing a parent session and I start talking about my failing well model, learning from failure, and they're all sitting there going, yeah, we do that. Yeah, we do that. Have you got anything new for us? And it was kind of like, the first time I'd actually come across parents who said, yeah, we do all that. Yeah, it's no problem. And apparently the Danes are well known for allowing their children to have failure and learn from that failure and move on. So I see some cultural differences around things like failure, around things like competition, about things like pressure. And I'm always trying to encourage parents to reduce the pressure and focus on the quality, not the quantity, and focus on the self-confidence and self-esteem of the children rather than their grades, marks and scores. So, yeah, I can't really make any greater generalizations than that.
It's interesting, Lance, it's different cultures and I'm not mentioning different cultures specifically, but when you go from country to country and you look at the expectations of parents and the academics, they will not have failure. And if a child has come home and he or she has scored, say, 99% in a very difficult maths exam, they will say, what happened to that 1%? And I'm not joking when I say this. And you can see the child, bright-eyed, big smile, look what I got. And instead of concentrating on that 99% that child does right, do you know what happens? That parent focuses on that 1%. There's another simple example of this as early years educators, good early years educators, have a spelling test, okay? One child spells dog D and with no other letters. Another spells it, couldn't spell it at all, nothing. Another spells it D-G. Another spells it D-A-G. And all of them get across. But the good teachers will say, well, look, that person spelled it with a D, started with a D. Out of, there's 3 letters, you get a tick for that. Another person spells it with a D and a G. You get 2 ticks for that.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about, is making that progress. Look, that child's making progress because instead of marking DG wrong, no, you moved up. You are now able to identify 2 of those letters. And it's so important, when you take something home to the parents don't say, oh, that was wrong, or focus on the stuff that was wrong. Focus on the stuff that was right and then make plans for the stuff that you can develop. But getting that across to parents that's a challenge.
Yeah. I think if our episode look young teachers, it's good recommendation for them to see only on positive sides of not focus only on results, but on the process of education, how to motivate younger generation.
And how to improve your results.
Yeah.
Results are really important. It's what you're going to do about it to improve those, and how schools can help, and how parents can help, and how a student can help himself or herself.
A few days ago, I see some experiment. It's like 2 circles. One circle have a stable way, and another with some down and up road. So it's mentioned that the more failure the person has, the more higher speed in order to achieve his or her goal. So maybe we could say that have more failures.
Well, as long as you learn from each one. I mean, the simplest thing I talk to teachers about is that when you hand back a test and there's a grade or a score, the students have got for a test, what do you do next? Because if you want to build in a failing well model, the next thing you have to do is to say to the children, look at every question you got wrong and find the right answer and rewrite the answer on the paper. So you make sure that you end up with a test that's got all the correct answers. And that's such a simple thing to do in a classroom, is to reprocess all the questions you got wrong. Immediately you get the test back. Because what that's saying is that for most children, when they sit a test, they think there's 2 outcomes, pass or fail. But if you put this in place, you've actually made 3 outcomes. There's pass, there's failing well, which is rewriting the answers and learning from every one you got wrong, and there's failing badly, where you just ignore the test and you just don't do anything about the questions you got wrong. So you've actually come up with 3 outcomes now, not just 2, and 2 of those outcomes are positive.
Yeah, I see.
So in my classroom as a teacher, I'd say in my classroom, it's great to succeed first time. It's also great to fail well. There's only one bad outcome, and that's failing badly. And it encourages children to take a risk. It encourages them to try harder. It encourages them to not be so bothered about the grade, the score, the mark.
Yes.
So extending that, you mentioned, Lance, you get a grade 8 out of 10. And I say to teachers, what's that? Well, I got 8 out of 10. That's fine, but what does that actually mean? What does that 8 out of 10? So we need better feedback on how to improve, where you went wrong and how to right that. It's interesting, there's been quite a bit of research done on feedback, and it's quite frightening actually. So a teacher there is marking all the work and putting suggestions against the essay, in the margin. I was reading some research a couple of years ago when studying some linguistics, that those remarks written in the margin have no impact whatsoever on student progress. And I thought, my goodness me. And I talked to a couple of other educators, and they quickly said, you've got to put those comments down as feedback, and then you've got to discuss them with the student. You must have this one-to-one discussion, or in a group discussion. What do my comments mean? Okay, you need to fix this, this and this, or this was wrong. How are we going to fix it? So to move from the comments, the constructive feedback were absolutely necessary to making real, authentic change, learning, progress. You need to have a one-on-one. Now, there's a problem with the one-on-one, is teachers say, we haven't got time to do all of this properly. And some teachers have got 30 in the class, for goodness sake. They just don't have time, or the curriculum is so overcrowded that we haven't got time to do all of this stuff. So we really do need to have a big look at the curriculum load, as I've mentioned earlier, and I haven't mentioned this, but the number of students in the classroom, and that means less profit in the for-profit schools, because you've got to have a lower pupil-teacher ratio, or it means in government schools more money being put into education. Now, good luck with that.
Yeah. Also, if we look at this situation from another side, I think it's positive correlation between when the school change academic director. So in most situations, the pressure on teachers increase, and they increase the number of these over curriculum stuff.
Trying to increase the teacher expertise.
In order to
It's
know,
kind of like a new broom always sweeps clean, doesn't it? You get a new director and they're always trying to change things and shake up the system, which causes stress amongst all the teachers. But no, I was thinking, sorry to interrupt, I was thinking back to what you were saying, Mike, about that feedback loop, getting that feedback loop working. So the teacher spends all weekend marking the students' essays and writes all the comments in red down the side, and the student gets that back, looks at the grade, ignores the comments, and just keeps on doing the same thing over and over again. But there is a possible solution. And what that is so let's say the teacher's teaching English and the child writes an English essay. And the teacher writes all the feedback down the side. And 100% of the grade for that first essay is based on how they wrote the essay, how well they did. But the second essay, the teacher says, okay, in the second essay, 10% of the grade is going to be allocated to whether you implemented the changes, the feedback that I gave you on the first essay. And then the third essay, 20% of the grade for the essay is based on whether you implemented the changes that I told you to do in the last essay. So that suddenly you're giving grades and scores for using the feedback that you got from teachers. And if you put a grade and a number on it, kids go, oh, do I have to do that now? And so they actually start reading the feedback and they start making the changes because they know they're going to get a grade or a score or a mark for it. And you can also do this with self-assessment, getting children to make their own assessment of the quality of their work. And you start giving them marks for accurate self-assessment. And you give them more and more marks for accurate self-assessment until finally they're actually self-assessing their own work because they've proved that they're a brilliant self-assessor. Yeah. So giving feedback, it's kind of like you've got to put some numbers on it to get kids to do it. But if you could put numbers on using feedback, then suddenly they start using it.
I saw that 3 days ago, having a conversation with a person and whom I know very well. And she said to me, I did some, English teaching in upper secondary. And she said, in the feedback, I asked, after the first cycle, I asked the students, okay, what was my feedback in the first instance? Now they had to name 6 points. They had to name 6 points and then demonstrate the change in their essay with those 6 points.
Perfect.
And otherwise, you're not progressing. So they had to actually identify it and change the next essay and to make sure they included this particular criterion or this particular skill set. It may be something as simple as paragraphs. The student didn't apply correct paragraphing techniques. Okay, that's 1 point. Right, now I've got to do that. I've got to do that this time. I don't identify every single thing in the essay because that's wrong. It's almost impossible to do. But just take 6 points or 4 points and show me that you have now an understanding of that. Demonstrate it. Mm-hmm. That's powerful teaching. And
absolutely.
3 or 4 days ago, that's all it was. I was having a conversation with this person who, by the way, is an expert teacher. It's explicit, but it's also constructivist. I explicitly give feedback to the students. This is where you can improve. This is what you got wrong. This is where you can improve. Now, constructivism, how do you demonstrate your learning? Explicitly demonstrate that learning. Okay. And that's powerful learning. Yeah. Powerful teachers, powerful learning.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Interesting. Let's talk about family culture and traditions in education. Family traditions play a huge role in shaping children. How can schools work with families to reinforce strong values?
Well, I guess it starts with identifying what the values are. I always ask as an exercise for parents to get them to consider what are the characteristics of a good person in your culture. What do you identify as the characteristics of a good person? And have you listed those? And have you worked those out with your children? So have you sat around the table at home and thought, well, what do you think makes up a good person? And let's come up with a list. Honesty, compassion, whatever. Make a list. And once you've got a list that everyone agrees in the family, stick it on the wall. And then any time a child demonstrates any one of those values, those characteristics of a good person, that child gets wonderful feedback, wonderful support, wonderful praise. Not based on grades or scores or marks or academics, based on demonstration of character. So the child gives part of their lunch to someone who's starving or gives, I don't know, but does something compassionate.
Yes.
And the parent notices that and gives them wonderful feedback about being a compassionate person.
Yeah.
So that's reinforcing that particular value. And of course, in different cultures, those values will change. They'll be different in different cultures. But if the family agrees on them, and then of course you can go to the school level. What are the values that this school holds highest? What are our top 10 values, virtues and values? And make a list. And then every time a child demonstrates those aspects of their culture that fit with those values, they get praise. So you're taking the emphasis off academics and putting it on the development of character. But I don't think you can come up with one standard list of virtues and values that everyone applies to, because there's lots of influences in every culture. But, if the school can agree on it, if the family can agree on it, and they can reinforce it, then you're going to get children to focus not just on performance in the classroom, but also performance as a human being, what makes a good person.
It's holistic education and practice. And it's something that, educators always talk about. I mentioned this holistic education. It's almost a throwaway line. That's not throwaway. That's putting in an action. It's interesting. So families, successful families at this holistic education do particularly well. I'm always interested in watching parents when they open the reports. Some report cards are about 14 pages long. My goodness me, how, and the parents always, they go straight to that mark.
Yep.
And they forget the values stuff that's going on, all of that stuff that we report on. They don't even read it. Is it a B or is it an A? And bang. And if it's not an A and the child was expected to get an A, God help the child. So a lot of the values education that we're talking about gets pushed to the side in reality by a proportion of our communities. Some proportions are higher than others. So we need these types of practical type solutions or practical type processes that can really push values and push it up to where they should be, right at the top. Right at the top, because, the proof's in the pudding. Parents just discard that report as far as... You may as well have a report this long. A, B, B, C, finish. You may as well have that, because the parents don't read the rest of it. You could write a lot of nonsense on that report and it'd go unnoticed by some parents.
Yeah.
So Lance talked about a practical process. Identify the values, and then follow it up with, have we done anything again? How are we going against those values? How are we going? And recognising those and articulate the progress made on those values. That's what makes good students and good academic grades, or good progress, very good individual progress. That's what makes good students. But my goodness me, it's a challenge.
By the way, how many kids you have?
How many children I have? Two.
Yeah.
Two.
And you?
I have 4.
Okay, I think you both should write the book in the future for young parents, and because we have this problem, because most of parents who work, they do not give such amount of feedback, but kids need this amount of feedback. So maybe
I have to say, I have written a book.
Oh, you already mentioned it.
This is a book I wrote 10 or 12 years ago called It's called The Importance of Failing Well. And it's a book for parents.
Wow.
And it's all about that model.
Thank you, Mr.
And I haven't, that one has not been translated so far, but I do have a book for parents.
Parenting's funny. It's funny. A lot of us just become parents for all sorts of reasons. In the late 80s, I took over a school that had a problem with children not being getting out of bed and coming to school late. And the parents were at me, what are we going to do about it? I said, bring the student, put them in the car, throw them in the car in their pajamas. No, I said, do that. So we had Monday morning or whatever it was, the first student thrown out of the car, not literally, in her pajamas crying. And I said, what happened? I wasn't ready on time. Didn't happen again. And you know, it's called tough love. How often have we seen people, myself included, say, right, this is your last chance. And then 2 seconds later, right, I'm going to give you one more chance. And then I'm going to give you one more chance.
Yes.
And or parents will reward their children for just doing the right thing. Don't reward children for doing just basically what they should be doing anyway. Reward people for doing something that's quite extraordinary. Otherwise, we're just constantly, giving students or giving children a reward because they came into the class quietly. Well, that was just a normal expectation, for goodness sake. And it's it's the same as the naughty boy. So we're working on this naughty boy's behaviour in class, and the first time he sits down quietly and he picks up his book, the teacher's all over him like a rash, saying, "Oh, you're such a good boy." No, well, actually, you're not. You're just doing everything that you just completed an act that every other child does every other day in his life, and he gets rewarded for that. Other students see that very, very quickly, that naughty Johnny gets rewarded for doing something that he should be doing right anyway. So that's it. I see it too often, and we've really got to raise the standards and raise the stakes on how to improve negative behaviour. And it's not rewarding behaviour that's just normal. It's not that. You've got to go way above that to be rewarded for outstanding behaviour.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Let's talk about rugby. New Zealand is famous for the All Blacks team spirit. What lessons can schools take from sports leadership?
Well, I can think of a couple of examples. One of our famous coaches, Steve Hansen, once was asked about the character of the All Blacks, and he said, it's very simple. He said, fiercely competitive on the field and humble and unassuming off the field. And that, I think, sums it up. Like, it's okay to be fiercely competitive when you're in a competitive game, but I think that characterises a lot of New Zealand sport. You know, when New Zealand won the America's Cup in Bermuda, and the final race was against Jimmy Spittle, and they were they were throwing things out at each other, saying all sorts of verbal stuff, all very competitive right up to the end. And the New Zealand team won. And the first thing Jimmy Spittle did was he picked up a big box of beer, cans of beer, which is common in New Zealand, and he took it round to the New Zealand shed and walked into the New Zealand shed with this big tray of beers and put it down and said, "Well done, guys." But up until the moment when he lost, he was slamming New Zealand and telling them off and saying all sorts of bad things. But as soon as New Zealand had won, he was congratulating them. You see, that to me is about, sportsmanship. The reason for playing competitive sport is to learn to be a good sportsperson. Sportsmanship, which is being gracious in victory and being generous in defeat. Wow. That's, to me, what we can take from the All Blacks.
Yeah. Two players for me stand out, and probably for most people in New Zealand and perhaps some people in the world. Two names, Richie McCaw and Dan Carter. Richie McCaw, probably the greatest captain in rugby's history. Okay? And that's probably, I don't think too many people would dispute that. 146 games as captain, for goodness sake, of New Zealand. An extraordinary man who played with a broken bone in his foot for the World Cup. Never complains. Dan Carter, and I'll compare this to soccer. Dan Carter had many, many great games. He was just a fantastic player. I remember one game he scored 4 tries and he was man of the match. And afterwards the sports reporter went over and interviewed him, and fantastic game, and just amazing. You know what he said? No, he said, but it was all about the team. They set me up. They made me look good. They made me look good, he said. That's Dan Carter. So humble, skillful and humble. No, I just finished off the try. It wasn't me. And I think football or soccer can take some sort of a look at that. When I see soccer, and I'm not an expert, and is it the world's game? Yes. Is it a beautiful game? Yes. But I see someone in soccer doing all of this work, and then he passes it at the last second, and someone just scores a goal without too much effort. The other person did all the work. That person who scores the goal takes his shirt off and runs towards the crowd, and he never even acknowledges. Never have I seen him acknowledge the person who did all the work. And I think that's sad. I really think it's sad. And it's nothing against football or soccer, because it is a great game and it's a highly skillful game. But in some ways, it's a game of many great individuals doing a thing. But for heaven's sake, if you score that goal, just acknowledge what the rest of the team has done for you to score that goal. And it's not only soccer, it's many other sports. In rugby, I think it's one of the greatest sports games, because it is a team game. There may be 8 people pushing against 8 people, etc., etc. But there's very, very rarely when a player doesn't acknowledge the rest of the team's effort when that try is scored. And that's the essence. Acknowledge other people's work in the team. It's not just about you. And in fact, in the dressing sheds, the All Blacks dressing sheds, on one occasion, it had written, and I don't know where it was, it's not all about you. It's about the team.
Wow.
Man, that philosophy.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm biased. I'm an All Black supporter, and Lance is an All Black supporter. But their philosophy, their mental coach, sports coaches, phenomenal. It's not all about you. Because if rugby was just about one person, you'd lose every single game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What kind of advice you could give to educators, parents, and students today? Let's start from you.
About anything in particular?
Yeah, just your advice.
Well, my whole philosophy on education is about helping kids to learn the skills, the thinking and learning skills they need in order to succeed at school and emotionally. And so in advice, I focus on the skills. If you want to improve your academic performance, then you've got to focus on the skills: critical thinking, creative thinking, collaboration, communication, media skills, language skills. All the skills will underpin every assessment that you do. So when you achieve a certain result and you want it to improve, look at, okay, what are the process skills? What are the thinking and learning skills that underpin the performance in mathematics or the performance in languages or whatever, and focus on those. You improve your skills, you will improve your outcomes, you will improve your results. And never ever neglect the emotional based skills, the resilience, the perseverance, even things like concentration. Those are underpin, emotions underpin everything. And so if you've got an emotionally stable child, they're going to produce much better results. But they've got to learn how to. One of the things I do a lot in my student work is get children to focus, to notice how they talk to themselves inside their own heads. And that's a really interesting thing, because some children think that they're going crazy because they've got this voice inside their head. They don't realize that they generate that voice. And once they realize they generate it, they can learn how to manage it. And they can learn how to make that internal dialogue work for them rather than against them. So it's a big part of my work. And so focus on the skills, the emotional and the academic skills, and you will improve performance in all aspects. And I guess that's advice. It's just a thought.
Yeah, Great recommendations, Mr. Lance. What about you, Mr. Mike?
I'll narrow that down, because we could speak about this all day. What advice? I'll say one word: listen. We listen to people. We don't necessarily have to take all that advice. So parents need to listen to educators. Educators need to listen to parents. Students, we need to listen to students. Students need to listen to us. And I remember a parent coming to me and saying, look, I met with you and I listened to you and you listened to me, but Nothing. What I said, nothing. You did nothing about that. I said, yes, I did. It just didn't agree with you, your idea. Okay? I said, didn't fit with the school's priorities. What you were saying was absolutely out of left field. But we still need to listen. We need to say, righto then, okay, I've listened to this. Look, we can do this, this and this. Can't do this. But at least people know that you were listening. And when that parent said to me, you did nothing about it, I should have actually said at the time, yes, I did, but it wasn't what you wanted. It was what, fitted in with the school. So listening and then providing feedback when you listen. And when we listen to students, and we always, in student protection policies, is one of the most powerful things when a student comes up and says to you, something bad is happening in my life. Some of the things you get to hear about are horrendous. You always listen and always take action. So with a student, you take the appropriate action, and with the parents, you take that appropriate action. But sometimes it just doesn't fit their context. But we need to. I think in that case, I need to explain myself a little more. I did listen. We can do this, but we can't do any of these other things. Yeah. But we still listened.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So let's finish our podcast. Thank you very much, Mr. Lance, Mr. Mike, for your expertise, for your recommendations, for your opinion. I hope that in future some new educators, new generation of educators could use your recommendations and build and open fantastic, great schools for future generation of leaders, of diplomats, and I hope that everything in education start evolutioning. If you want to say something else, it will be great. Maybe you could say some advices for not only for teachers and students, but also for businessmen who open schools. Maybe some advices to our Kazakhstan businessmen who want to open school.
That's not my field of expertise. That's much more Mike's field of expertise. The whole Kazakhstan education system is trying to move from a content-based system, a knowledge-based system, to a competency-based system, a process-based system. And I think that's a wonderful aspiration, to have children involved in the process of learning as well as picking up the knowledge. Not that knowledge and process need to be exclusive. Children need to learn things, they need to know things, they need to understand things, but they also need to focus on the process. And so, to me, it requires for teachers much more than just changing their teaching method. You can't suddenly change one day from being the teacher who stands up there and writes everything on the board and the children write it down. That's a content-based system, to a teacher who engages the children with inquiry learning and gets them to find out what is true for themselves through their own research. You can't just throw the switch like that and expect children to be good at inquiry learning or problem-based learning or any of the more experiential or innovative learning methods. You can't expect kids to be able to do that. So it's going to be a failure unless you teach them how to do good quality inquiry learning first, which is my whole project, is to the idea of having a class, I think just 1 hour per week per student, to focus on the skills of learning that they're going to need that week and the next week. So it's coordinated with their intellectual development. And so they learn the skills of inquiry learning, and then the teacher can go through can change their teaching methods to much more inquiry-based or problems-based, because knowing that the children have the skills. And so, to me, it's not a big change, but it is a change. But I think that all teachers and administrators have to keep in mind that we've got to teach the children how to learn effectively before we change the teaching methods to get them to learn more effectively. So that would be my takeaway.
Thank you, Mr. Lance.
My advice to investors in schools is fairly simple. Quality education will bring about good profits. And I'll let them think about the other side of the coin to that. Sure, good profits can come out of ordinary education, but that's not sustainable. Parents vote with their feet and walk out of the school. You must always strive towards outstanding education, and that just automatically brings about good profits because parents want to come to your school. And they say, well, that school's they're in here for the long term. They're in here for the long term. My child can spend 15 years at this school, and we know that school's going to provide for them. And then the owner can sit back there and say, okay, I'm making good profits out of that. And I'm proud because it is an outstanding school. I'm not sure how many people would say, I'm proud of that school because I'm making a lot of money, but we know the quality of education is only okay. Sustainable quality education brings about good profits. That's what I would say.
I also see a lot of private schools, not only in Central Asia, in the world, use this when they create new schools and build new buildings. They use this marketing strategy to make mission, vision, but it's all about profit. But what you say, it's explained that we do not need use marketing, these tools to make mission and vision. We need to understand what are our team's mission and vision as educators. And then maybe it's help for marketing, but not vice versa.
Absolutely.
It's funny, isn't it? Good marketing. When you're running an outstanding school, you do no marketing. The parents in the car park do it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great school.
Exactly.
That's a good school, and away it goes. And the owner can sit back there and say, it's a great school and I'm making money. No issue about making money, but it's not at the expense of the outstanding facet of that school.
Yes. Me also, as a young dad, I have 2 boys, 8 years, 4 years. I have. Thank you very much for your knowledge. I receive a lot of insights for me as a young dad, as an educator, and I hope that I will use your recommendation in my community also to develop our parent skills, first of all, and then to develop education in our city.
Thank you for the invite.
Yes,
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Azat. Wonderful, as always.